So Pat, the vote of the British public is known. They have voted to leave the European Union. We are very much now in unprecedented territory. What next for the EU?
I think it is a very profound, difficult, for myself, I'd say even shocking result. I think we enter a new age of uncertainty. I think there's a very high risk with the evolution of populist politics, anti-establishment, anti-politics politics in so many European states that we could risk a domino effect in many places. And I think, unhappily, we're in for a rough ride.
Are there any lessons the EU can learn from the Brexit campaign to try and prevent an uptake in kind of pro-exit feeling in other EU member states?
I think it needs a lot of soul searching to ask, why is European public opinion going down in terms of its support for the European Union and its institutions? I might add also for national political institutions. And what is it about politics and people, about the governed and their lack of consent that is front and centre today? My own feeling is it's less about who decides and more about what has not been decided. A lot of people talk about muddling through. That keeps things going, but it doesn't necessarily thoroughly address problems. I think for me, the lesson in a few words, many of the aspirations of the EU are good and positive. Many of the outcomes are well short of the aspiration, and that the delivery gap is becoming a credibility gap, and that's the key.
What likelihood do you think there is of the 2-year period that the treaty provides for Britain to negotiate its exit? What likelihood do you think of that period being extended?
Well, we're right at the beginning of something that's complex, and everybody will now kind of line up their opening positions. It is clear to me that the European institutions, and I believe if it was tested, the European Court, will insist that Article 50, the divorce clause in the treaty, is the only route open to an exiting state. If it needed more than 2 years, my best guess, we've never been through this, so it's uncharted territory, my best guess is that it would require unanimity at the Council of Ministers. And if you didn't get all the states agreeing, then you would have a sudden dilemma and a sudden death play, as it were, near the end. So this will require, I think, to cool it, calm, reflect, and try to put back in the tracks as best we can the ability to salvage the greatest amount possible, allowing that this is really not the result that anyone wished for, at least outside the UK.
So a very uncertain future for Europe, a very uncertain future for Britain, and a lot of talking still to be done.
Yes, and the talking still to be done. I mean, it starts, of course, with all the rawness that happens in a campaign, but raw doesn't work when you've got to do business. And doing the business of what is the next model of engagement will be complex, but it requires a certain degree of calmness. And I think the Republic of Ireland, whose interests straddle both sides, can play a political and diplomatic role, not in the highest profile, but in a quiet way in the corridors of influence and power, to try to make sure that the best bargain is struck, also to have regard to the risks we have, which are now disproportionately larger by size than any other state of the Union.
But it's important to remember, of course, that Ireland remains a member of the EU and that there is no question of Ireland leaving the EU at this point.
On the contrary, it's very clear that the government's strategy now is to tell the entire world we're staying where we are and we're going to work our very hardest to make the greatest success of it. And that therefore requires of us to be an agent of goodwill in this new dialectic that has emerged between continental Europe and the EU in general, and the United Kingdom and its political power in particular.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you.